Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the program, my name is Irina Zuckerman and I am the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. Today we have a special program for you from Cambridge. We have a special guest, Dr. Mohamed Qubaty, and he is currently the acting chairman of the Southern Civil Democratic Rally, and he is the former Minister of Tourism and Mass Media and Information from Yemen. We are here at a conference discussing the past, present, and future of Aden. For those who are not aware, Aden has played a key role historically, but also in light of recent events in the Middle East. It has been a historic port, a city known for its culture, diversity, and geopolitical strategic importance. Today, we know more about the security and economic issues and concerns, about sectarian and political and religious infighting. But can the future become a reflection of the great past of Aden? That is what we're here to discuss today. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Qubaty. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got involved in politics for our audience.
Anyhow, perhaps if you see my card, sometimes some people get a little bit astonished when they see FRCS. I'm a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons, actually. I'm a professor of surgery in the university back in Yemen. But politics actually goes back because we have a family. My uncle was at one time, deputy prime minister. He was number 2, nearly vice president, and so on, and different ministries. But I actually started my studies here after doing my A level. The America is something you call it high school. I started studying law in the beginning. So I've studied law for nearly 2 years. But because I'm from Aden, and at one time Aden, people, if your viewers would remember, Aden was at that time part of the South Yemen, which was a pro-Soviet entity, because this was Yemen before unification. So the socialists in Aden thought, well, that was in 1984, and they said, no, we don't need any more lawyers. If you finish law, then you go and work with the government. You cannot open your own office. So my teacher, who was at that time, one of the chief judges, he came and said, with my father, said, Mohammed, stop. You cannot continue this unless you're going to go back and work with the government. So I switched from law to medicine. So I became, then I went to study medicine again at King's College. I was here first at King's College, Cambridge, went to King's College, London, and I finished medicine. But I was most of the time very much, involved in public life, student life, and active in all those spheres. But when I went back and became a professor in Sana'a, I was professor of surgery there. The late president of Yemen, because I went back after unification, north and south, and there was. So I think they must have got report that at one time I was very active within the student union here in UK, within the immigrant political activities outside Yemen. So I only worked for from 1992 to 1998, and the president, when he came to London, he came to pay a state visit here to London. That was the only state visit by any president to England. And I was involved at that time with the British Yemeni Friendship Association or Society in Sana'a. We have got 2 friendship societies. One in UK called the British Yemeni Friendship Society. I was involved in establishing it. And the other one in Sana'a was called Yemeni British Friendship Association. So we were involved to help, the visit of the president, which was a state visit. And he got very much impressed with the way we have, arranged for the visit, we held here actually at that time, I think our Jewish friends from Aden would remember, there was a 1-month festival here in UK called the Yemeni Festival in UK. So he decided that he wanted to pull me out from the university to become, a prime minister, political advisor at that time. So I started being a prime minister, and I also appeared, I think, more than once with even the famous, your one of your famous programs, I think 24. What do you call it? I'm trying to remember its name. And I became as well at that time the head of the political and foreign relations department. And I was sent because our views at that time, trying to, especially for women and progress and democratization and all of these views which came, some of them thought were more Westerners, on our views. So they didn't tolerate a lot of those ideas. So the president said, it's time to send you out as an ambassador. So I was sent as an ambassador to Lebanon. That was in 2003, and as well ambassador in Cyprus. The time when Cyprus joined the Union, the European Union. And from there, it went on. When I finished my term as ambassador, I went back. They didn't allow me to go to the university, so I had to continue as political advisor for the prime minister, a new prime minister. But by the time, because we're looking for democratization, we're looking for, I used to support the idea of getting a federal state, because the people in the South, we in the South felt that we were left out, The country joined was North and South, and they got into one sort of entity, but the Southerners felt they were let off, They were not real partners. They participated, but they were not partners, and we're looking. So at that time we established this group, which we said which you have read at the beginning, the Southern Civil Democratic Rally, which was looking for establishing democratization, getting the rule of law, and trying to transfer Yemen or to change it into a federal system. And this was agreed upon after the change which happened in Yemen in 2012, when the former president left, and there was a new president, and there was the famous conference in Sana'a, which went for nearly 1 year, supported by regional, countries like Saudi Arabia, all Gulf countries, and the US and the UK and the Europeans. It was very famous at that time, and there are many, actually, United Nations Security Council resolutions which were, issued on building on that conference. It was called the National Dialogue Conference in Yemen, which continued for 1 year. And we did actually manage to push on the ideas of democratization, the rule of law, federalism, and so on. But unfortunately, I think we're caught wrong-footed, and suddenly the Iranian influence appeared, and that was a mistake, I think, of the previous president. He sort of put his stake besides the Iranians, and this is what happened now. The Houthis are ruling nearly 1/3 of the country, and the people who at that time were with the ideas of federalism and so on are ruling now another 2/3 of the country. But the situation is very grave. I think people live here now. If you follow every day, Yemen is on the news. We have got a huge humanitarian crisis and problem in Yemen. There's no stability. We have got now, more than one resolution was passed by the UN Security Council trying to side and help Yemen, but proxy war between, what's happening, the global powers, and the regional powers in the country, in the Arabian Peninsula, is actually having a big toll on us.
So let's look at how it all came to be, because during the Soviet era there was a lot of similar divisions. We remember East and West Germany,
yes,
which was eventually reunified as well with somewhat better results, but East Germany was significantly underdeveloped compared to West, and it had a completely different set of values. South Yemen, which was Soviet influenced, was also where the more oil and gas rich area of the country. On the other hand, the North Yemen is where a group we now know as Houthis resided, a religious minority who at the time was siding with the Saudi-led coalition against the Nasser's Egypt-led forces into the country. How did this group come from being an ally, albeit a little bit a little bit out there, to becoming a radicalized group that aligned itself with Iran. Because Iran, eventually became an Islamist republic. But why did this group gravitate to them? What made them so
Yes.
interested?
I think you are, alluding at the idea. There was the royalists in Yemen, but the Houthis were not part of the royalists at that time. If you go back in history in the 60s, when there was fighting between, the royalists and the republicans, as you've said, the Egyptians were there. The royalists at that time were more, siding with the older, royal family, which was the Hamiduddin family. The Houthis are a new group of people who claim to be as if they are Zaydis, like the royal previous family, but they are more influenced by Iran. It's just similar sort of story, just like in Lebanon. I was ambassador in Lebanon. Hezbollah, managed to play this game of that they are trying to show themselves pro-Arab, pro-nationalism and so on. But eventually, they turned out to manage and built a state within the state. The same thing, the Houthis there. They were all the time since the 1962 revolution, which brought down the royal family. They were working very, very sort underground, and they managed gradually to appear, and they eventually managed to get hold of the power. I think the wrong thing there which happened, or the mistake which happened, was the mistake of the previous president, President Ali Abdullah Saleh. He built sort of a relation with them. He thought that he could use them against the southerners and the southern part of North Yemen, because it's roughly, if you start thinking about Zaydi and Shafi'i, Sunnis and so on, the northern highlands is where the Houthis are, and the southern part of which is the plateau done in the north are Sunni, and with the South Yemen. So he was trying to help them, I think, and they managed to get and grasp power. But it's now obvious that the people who are siding with the Houthis are Iran and the pro-Iranian, entities in the area.
From what I understand, the Houthis, which started out as a family, ended up starting an entire movement by intermarrying with various other families and essentially following this ideology of alleged descent from the Prophet's tribe, and how allegedly they're the same as some royal families in the Middle East.
The problem is not being royal. The problem, if these people believe that they have got, you can't, in this day and age, go and convince people that you have got divine right to rule them. So the Houthis believe in that. They believe this is something which a lot of people, I think, your viewers and a lot of people in the West in general, and this is part of I think, the fault which has the government which came after Ali Abdullah Saleh could not understand how to show and how to actually present themselves to the outside world, so as to show what are the Houthis really. The Houthis believe in themselves. They don't believe in democracy. They believe that they have got divine right to rule because they descend from the Prophet, as they say. But this is something which cannot be accepted at this day and age. Even the Iranians have said that. But they themselves are saying this. They think that they've got the right to rule because they descend from Muhammad, or from previous Prophet Muhammad, which is, I think, nonsense at this day and time. Nobody would accept it in Yemen, and that's why the issue of gaining back peace and stability it will be hard-fetched if such a group which does not want to agree to work. You see, in the National Dialogue Conference, we agreed the Houthis could form their own party, work in politics, but as the others, play on the ground, similar like others, form your own party, have your own agenda, but don't try to impose your views on the others that you have got this divine right. And they managed, unfortunately, because of the centralization of power in the north. They managed to grab all the centers of power. The army is in their hand, the intelligence and the security forces, all of these forces are in their hand, on the basis again of being, these tribes from the north, that they have got this, because they continue to rule. If you go back in history, these people at one time, the long history of Yemen for over 12 centuries, these imams used to rule, one after the other, until the Turks left and so on. But and they have been all the time supported by these tribes around Sana'a in the northern plateau.
Meanwhile, in the south, while the West was very concerned with the incursion of communism, sectarian local politics played at least as much of a role because we saw that around the Arab Spring, we saw the emergence of al-Islah, and we saw various movements that were fairly fluid and dynamic, and you had people who were secessionists who wanted to leave the union, and then people who were Islamists, but some of them wanted unity, other ones wanted to leave, and they kept moving from party to party, and all of it was very complicated and hard to follow for someone who does not live in the area. How did the Arab Spring basically change or cement this equation? And
see, the Arab Spring, as you have mentioned, I think at that time the Muslim Brotherhoods and all of these Islamists managed to, as it happened everywhere, in Egypt, in Syria, in Tunisia, they managed to take over the youth movement because they were the most organized political grouping, especially if you go in Egypt or in Tunisia, or even they were underground. In Yemen, they used to work openly. They had their own party, and then because of the connections they had with the power, the centers of power, because they were there. The Muslim Brotherhood was actually involved previously from, secretly, they were in over more than 30, 40 years working. I mean, they came out suddenly, but they came out, unlike in Egypt when they appeared only after the Arab Spring. In Yemen, they were there for 40 years, and then they came out with the unification, because unification was at that time agreed upon to be parallel with democratization. So they formed their own party, and they were, for the 40 years when they were influential within the ruling cliques and ruling centers of power, they managed to have power. But now they have lost. The beating which they took from the Houthis showed that they were eventually not that strong. Once the tribes decided that they're going to side with the Houthis, the Muslim Brotherhood and all their sheikhs and so on, they were very, very famous. Sheikhs are chiefs of the tribes. All these of them had to, at the end, to give up and agree to the Houthis to be the real ruler. But in the south, Muslim Brotherhood was very weak, as you know, because during the Soviet era and so on, they were not there. Mostly in the south, we have got liberal, you can say you've got socialists, you've got liberals, and you have got other groups, Nasrites, Ba'athis, nationalist. But the Muslim Brotherhood is not that strong in the south. Historically, they moved it because for more than 30, 40 years they were not there. They only started to appear with the unification in 1990. So their influence is not that clear. But as you have mentioned, in the south we have got these groupings now, which they think that it will be difficult, to manage to get back the power in the hands of democracy. So they are siding with this view that if we cannot beat these people and the world is just going to watch it, why don't we regain our previous entity as South Yemen and build our own government and so on. Perhaps that will be one way to confront the Houthis. That's how people are actually taking this idea of building a separate entity in the south, on the basis that we had a previous state in the south, though it was wrong-footed and it was pro-Soviet, but this time can have good relations with the area around us, with the Saudis, with the Gulf countries and so on, and that's why you find now a change of political alliances. At one time, when the South was pro-Soviet, the whole of the Arabian Peninsula, GCC, Saudi Arabia, were against them. Now it's the other way around. The South could be could be supported by Russia, by the West, by UK, by Europe, and as well by the the local and regional powers like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and the rest of them. Apart from perhaps Oman, which is to a certain state having taking a neutral position, trying to appear as if it's going to try and get peace in Yemen, and let's hope that their efforts gain momentum. They've tried all the best, even on the past 1 week or 2 weeks, but they've failed. The Houthis are, and the Iranians are stancing staunchly on the idea that they will continue to rule North Yemen. They don't want to get the country back unified, and they don't want to share power with the rest of the sectors of the community of the Yemeni community. It will be quite difficult how to continue in the future. That's why the idea of separation or regaining the southern entity or southern republic by itself.
Here's something that's curious to me. The Muslim Brotherhood claims to be opposed to the Houthis, or has claimed at various points in time, but as we know from Iran's example, Muslim Brotherhood ideology was very welcome there. It was translated to Farsi, and these two ideological groups have made common cause a lot of the time. So how can it be that al-Islah in the south claims to be opposed to the Houthis, but then wants to, is open to unifying with them, and at various times has been accused of leaking intelligence information and so forth. Who are they with really, and how did the various powers, the Yemen government at one point, the Saudis and so forth, were fooled into believing that they could in some way join forces with al-Islah against the Houthis?
I think that was part of the inaccuracy of analyzing the whole structure of power in the Yemen. One time, as I said, Islah were part of the ruling power centers in the north, and at that time they had very good relations with the Saudis and with all of the monarchical ruling families in the Arab world, especially in the Arabian Peninsula. But when the Arab Spring happened, I think that's when the Saudis, the GCC came to say, well, these people are dangerous, we don't want them, and they left them. And that pushed, I think, well, they had relations from the beginning. I think the Muslim Brotherhood, the international Muslim Brotherhood movement is very clever. If you remember, like one of the sons, actually part of the family of Bin Laden, moved to Iran, and they are still in Iran. And in Palestine, you've got the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and Al Jihad, who were part of the Muslim Brotherhood, but they were pro-Iranian. So the complex relation of the Muslim Brotherhood international movement and Islah with relation with, they're trying to, at the end, it's just because the Houthis are very much pro-Iranian and clearly pro-Iranian, and they could be, and they were against, they were used obviously against the other Arab countries. That's why they're siding with them. But as you have mentioned, I won't be surprised if somewhere, sometime they sort of gain some and work out for a formula which could get them together.
So everyone, for most of the West, the history of the current of contemporary Yemen starts with the Houthi uprising in 2014 and then the civil war that followed. But the Houthis have actually been waging incursions at the Yemen government for years before that final breakout. Those incursions and small wars are hardly ever mentioned. How did these incursions prepare the pathway for the rebellion? What mistakes were made in handling? What do you think should have been done, in retrospect? Could anything have been done given the Arab Spring context?
This is a very good question. You see, The Houthis, as you have said, the clashes with the Houthis started, I remember, in early 2004, while I was ambassador in Lebanon. And at that time, it appeared as if they were fighting the president and his power. But the question in North Yemen at that time, or in Yemen in general, was similar just like Egypt, like Syria, like in Libya, is a question of succession. And the former president was trying to get his son as a successor. But the previous build-up of power was a share between the president and the Muslim Brotherhood and his cousins, Ali Muhsin and the Sheikh Abdullah Hoover. So once they felt that he is trying to move to get his son to take over, that's when things started. So during the clashes with the Houthis, Ali, the former president, was very clever. What was happening? He was using the Muslim Brotherhood and the rest of the army, not his son's army, not the Republican Guards. He was using the other, parts of the family of the army to fight the Houthis. So as if he was trying to weaken the Houthis. He was trying to get the Muslim Brotherhood fight with the Houthis so as to weaken. And it is now well clear that once the Muslim Brotherhood and the rest of the army was about to defeat the Houthis, he will stop the war. So as to give them more chance. But even some reports have said that he was at the same time, providing weapons for the Houthis and providing weapons for the other side. So he was playing this game. Unfortunately, he was killed by the Houthis because, and as he's always famous saying that he was ruling Yemen by dancing over the heads of snakes. So this time the snakes bit him because he was trying to play. So on 6 different occasions, 6 different wars before the Houthis came in 2014 to rule, he was actually as if he was training the Houthis how to get stronger. He was giving them some more experience and power to eventually thinking that they will only confront the Muslim Brotherhood and the rest of the army, which was part of him at one time, but they were with the sheikhs and they were with the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah. The question you've got to understand that the Muslim Brotherhood, it has got 3 separate entities. There was the sheikhs, which are the chiefs of they form one group of the Islam, and then you have got the religious leaders and so on, and then you have got part of the army, so you've got some army. So all these 3 groupings were trying to fight the Houthis, but eventually the Houthis were sided with the other half of the stronger part. Actually, when the Houthis took over, it was the Republican Guards who actually the real forces, which were the real armed forces for Yemen, who actually, stripped their own, real uniform, and they wear the Houthi uniform, and they are the people who entered into Sana'a. So the Houthis managed to catch and to actually conquer the capital by the forces of the former president. Because there was a new president at that time, which was brought by the so-called GCC initiative, the vice president. So it's a very complicated thing which happened, but now it's clear. I remember Jamal bin Umar, at that time he was, an envoy of the United Nations. He was perplexed. He said, how is this happening? I said, what do you mean how it's happening? He said, this is a puzzle. It's not, I told him, it's not a puzzle. The people who came from all the north, because at one time we knew that they were not that strong, the Houthis. You've got Republican Guards here, more than 100,000. They changed their clothes and appeared as tribesmen and fought beside the Houthis. And that's how they managed to beat the Muslim Brotherhood on the other side of the army, and who ran away. Most of them fled away, the Muslim Brotherhood military leaders.
Yes. Well, that's very interesting because Jamal Ben Omar's role as an envoy was quite controversial, and what happened right afterwards is even more so, given that he started working for Qatar. Qatar itself was expelled by the Arab coalition, supposedly for leaking intelligence information and getting a base attacked by the Houthis and so on and so forth. So some of these political characters, their own role is in all of this is unexplained. They seem to be surprised by everything, but yet they're in the middle of all these events. So how can they be really all that shocked by what is going on?
I think part of it, I think perhaps it's our mistake. You know, the people who were on the other side were, you know, groups which fought each other. You know, all these people who are fighting for, you know, democratization and a building of a state of law and order and getting, you know, devolving the power by building a federal state and so on. They were from different positions and they were far away from actual centers of power. They're mostly, you could say, they were intellectuals and so on, but the real power was in the hand of the tribes and in the hands of the army. And those are the people eventually who got back to rule the state. So all this question that there was a president and so on is actually a facade, but the real power is in the name of is in the hands of the tribes and the military people who are from these tribes. They could say that we are with the GCs, with the ruling party at that time, which was known as the General People's Congress, or they could say we are with Islah, or they could say with the Houthis. But eventually they are more related to the tribal you know, power built there, which has been there for the past 50, 60 years at least, since the royalists were driven out. New power sharing, which has happened in 1970 after the war between the royalists and the republicans, formed this ruling group, which is continuing to rule till now.
It seems to me that this key issue, the issue of tribal power, has been written out entirely from the political history over the last few years. All we talk about is the Arab coalition and the Yemen government and Iran and the three of them in various combinations, but we don't talk about these tribal developments on the ground, nor does it seem to be that anyone involved in the political process, whether it's the U.S. envoy for special envoy for Yemen, or the UN, or various other political players, they don't seem to be talking about these coalitions. They seem to be talking to the facades. So, do you think that has played a role in the conflict not being resolved?
Yes, I think that sort of analysis could be true, you know, because unless if you mean, once you said speak about the Houthis, you mean the tribes, because the Houthis, after all, are those, you know, few, you know, leaders who have been sided, so we have said, with Iran, or have been working underground for a long time, but eventually they have been, it's the power of the tribes who shifted, you know, allegiance from Ali Abdullah Saleh to the Houthis, and they managed to get power. So yes, I mean, it's the way we have got to analyze, you know, the structure of power, and that's what keeps the South Yemen far away. We in the South, those tribes haven't got the tribals. The tribes were nearly, since the British time, got weaker and weaker, and there was a sort of, you know, a new state which was built on different bases from the north. Whereas in the north, it has been all the time the power of the tribes was actually the center for power.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that because a lot of the old school analysts in the U.S. in particular place, you know, there's the political realists and the idealists, and the political realists are all about power shift. So they should be at the forefront of understanding that tribal politics are the ultimate realpolitik, because they shift allegiance according to power and not necessarily ideology. But that simple observation seems to have escaped everyone, including the Arab coalition, which came in supposedly to put down the rebellion alongside the Yemen government, and yet seems to have gotten stuck on the ideological element rather than on the power element. In other words, when there was an opportunity to bring some of the northerners out of this kinship alliance with the pro-Iran ideologues and the Houthis, that did not occur. Why are the people who themselves come from tribal societies, how did they miss that simple logical understanding of these dynamics?
I think that if we go to the Saudi case, I think they did realize at one time, the Saudis, but at that time they built it on the idea of Muslim, they are Muslims and we're going to get, they never went into the actual tribal composition. And then apart from that, don't forget that these tribes in the north are mostly, they are not Sunnah, they are Zaydis. Zaydis are not Shia, but they are somewhere in the middle. And perhaps they could not understand these tribes from that stance. So the relation was built mostly on interest. You pay these tribes, you gain them, but there was no real, forging of not agreement, forging of alliance. So this, whereas with Iran, it's a forging of alliance, and the Iranians have been playing. If you go back in the history of Yemen, the Iranians have arrived in Yemen more than once previously. During, if you go back in the early 5th century, when the influence of Ethiopia and Abyssinia came to, and the Romans and the Romans tried during the Byzantine time. The rulers of Yemen tried to get some help from the Iranians. And these people who are actually now, some of them are come from those days. They are they sort of know themselves that they had relations because they came. Some of these tribes, especially the 7 tribes, we call them Bani Bahlul, Bani Dhubyan, all these Bani were actually at one time, originally they came from Iran, and Zaydi state has been built there in Dabristan in Iran long time ago. We're going back in history like 1,000 years, where they originated from there. So when they came as people again during Islam. There was these tribes fighting between them. They wanted somebody, what do you call a broker who could settle problems. So they resorted to these people who presented themselves as they are relatives or descendants of the Prophet, and that's how the tribes believed in them for over 1,200 years now. So they've been getting this power on the basis that they are brokers between these tribes on those bases.
So if the local regional powers were not able to break through this long history, and they were not able to kind of go around to overcome or actually use as an opportunity this historical dynamics, what can be asked of the West? That
No, the West is, you see, the question, we have got to understand these people are after their interests. I mean, the Saudis try to buy them through money, but
as
I mean,
the Saudis do.
yes, but unfortunately, the question where the West could help is, you see, as you remember, the South was pro-Soviet, okay, at that time, and the war broke between South and North two times. The South, which was a smaller republic as regards population, but it was bigger as that, was about to win those two wars in 1972 and 1979, because they did build a proper army at that time, helped by the Soviets. We had 10,000 and more than, in the 10,000s, people who were trained in the Soviet Union, in different military academies and so on, and as well the security. But since the fall of the government in Sana'a, we have not managed to build all these institutions. No more real army, no more real security, whereas the Houthis have inherited all the previous, the previous army. They inherited the previous, security apparatus, the previous police and everything. The new, the people who went to the south after they were being beaten in the war, or they lost the war of 1994 during unification, they could not rebuild, and that's where when I spoke today, I thought that the whole question which is missing in the south is security sector reform, and security sector reform and governance. Help from regional powers, international powers could help the south to rebuild themselves, to rebuild the state again, and the south could build an army, because these are tribes who are fighting in the north. Whereas in the south, with the help of the Russians at that time, it was a real army which was about to defeat them twice. if it was not for Syria and Iraq at that time in 1979, I was a student here at that time. They were the Southerners were only halfway to defeat the Northerners. But Iraq and Syria at that time said, okay, if you don't stop, we're going to send 4 divisions of our armies. At that time, when there was the honeymoon between Iraq and Syria at that time, in 1979. But at that time, what happened? The South, all the area around us was again the South. It was only the Soviets and the Eastern Bloc was with the South. This time, the situation is the other way around. But the Saudis could not help us in building a new army and building the new state again to repower it, which can confront, after all, if you have a new state which is built on modern, ideas and a modern army and so on, could easily stand and confront these Houthis. Especially the Houthis are only ruling and they've got their social acceptance only in half of the north, in the northern plateau, in the highlands.
Indeed, after the Arab coalition came in, several mysterious things happened that to me I cannot explain. First, some people like Ali Mohsen, the relative of
the previous president,
who ended up being such a controversial figure, killed by Houthis after playing all these games. This Ali Mohsen remains in the government despite being various claims that he's connected to Al Qaeda. US comes in to fight Al Qaeda and is perfectly fine with Ali Mohsen being in the government. US is there for years trying to help with logistics and whatever against Al Qaeda and ISIS, and meanwhile the Al Qaeda man is right there sitting at the negotiating table. Everyone's complaining that the humanitarian aid is not reaching them, and only Al Qaeda can deliver that aid. So I guess they let him have a pass with that. Meanwhile, the Saudis and the Emiratis, are arming different factions sometimes against each other, and
that's the real mystery. I
think how did this all come about? Everybody claims they want to beat the Houthis. Everyone wants Iran out of there. Everybody wants Al Qaeda out of there. So how do they have Al Qaeda men inside the government and all the infighting factions against each other, which obviously enables all these other people?
See, the question here again, I told you, did these people, we call them the quartet, the US, the UK, the Saudis, and the UAE. Did they actually try to build the state back in the south? Because if you wanted to be, you should not have left Ali Mohsen to be calling the shots. Ali Mohsen was not fighting actually. These people are so corrupt. They were after money. They milked the Arabs and as Ali Abdullah Saleh used to do. Ali Abdullah Saleh, when I left him, I was here giving a talk at that time. And he was milking the Americans because Ali Abdullah Saleh and Ali Mohsen are the people who built Al-Qaeda. But they thought that the best way to get money is to use Al-Qaeda to sort of blackmail the West. Again, Ali Mohsen has used that game again and continued. They're blackmailing them. But the way to confront Al-Qaeda was to build a real army and real proper security apparatus, and being helped by the world to regain this, who could fight the Al-Qaeda. Again now, we are trying, in my paper, which I have not mentioned, some steps like that are appearing. We, in the South, we have now, and the government, the new Minister of Defense was, I think last year, was in United Arab Emirates, and they signed a new agreement to try and get some help as regards fighting terrorism and so on. So I think, we need a real, role for the states and the Europeans and UK in the state. Now what is happening, they've just allowed the Saudis and the Emiratis to sort of drive the whole show. These people, though they are very good, helpful, but their experience in trying to rebuild a failed state is very limited. Yemen or the South is a failed state. You need to help it to rebuild it. And you can only rebuild it by giving proper assistance towards establishing the whole institutions of the state, including the army, as I said, the police, the legal framework for the country, the port, and courts are not working in Yemen, in Aden and the South. The police stations are not working, so there's complete loss of of the rule of law, and without concentrating on law and order, it's a lost case.
As far as I see, the Emiratis have mostly withdrawn to focus on Sokotra and a few strategic locations, but they don't seem to be playing a very vocal role in all of this.
I don't blame them. They don't have that experience, as I've said. They don't have the foots on the ground, to get foots on the ground, to train again a new army and to train again a new police force and new security institutions. That's a big sort of role which is needed. The Saudi could have played that role, or perhaps the Europeans and the Americans.
Well, here's where we're looking at another set of very strange circumstances. You have in the past Al Qaeda and the Houthis coordinating attacks against southern forces. You have the new head of Al Qaeda, Batarfi, who was Yemeni by Hadramouti, but he was born in Saudi, and his family members are all over.
Where about?
Saudi.
I think he's killed. I think I don't know.
He's alive. No.
He's alive.
He's very much alive. Not only is he alive, but supposedly he's been meeting with the Houthis, arranging prisoner exchanges, arranging arms trade. And as far as I see, the Saudis are communicating with Al Qaeda through family in Saudi Arabia and with the Houthis through the back channels that they've had the entire time. So this entire time, were they really focused on winning the Houthis and breaking down Al Qaeda? What exactly were the aims they were pursuing with this? If they
I think they're approaching all these tasks half-hearted. I think that's my comment to it. If there were a real commitment, as I said, they've got to rebuild the army again in the south. These tens of thousands of previous officers and who were in the different branches of the armed forces could have been, you could build on them. Some of them are now old, but still, they came and they studied from Germany, from Poland, from Russia, from all this. They are still there, but still you've got young people and so on. Try and train them and build. We never had. The military school was closed, the police school was closed, all these areas. So you need real effort towards gaining and rebuilding the state. Once you rebuild the state, then you get a real power to confront all these groupings. But you cannot confront them by having militias on the ground. We don't have now, unfortunately, we don't have a real army there in the south. It's mostly groups have been armed by the Emiratis or the Saudis and so on, but they're not a real army. The same thing, we don't have real, armed security forces there. If all its different departments are not there, it's not there. So I think the focus has got to be there, and if held. Unfortunately, the Saudis have spent a lot of money, which could have, if it went into the real, proper channels, but not through Ali Mohsen, as you have said, or through the corrupt ministers of defense, and the corrupt ministers of interior, and the corrupt Yemeni government now. You see, it's an inefficient Yemeni government which is just continuing to play a role and sitting on the sidelines and failed in all other aspects of running the country.
So one of the things that everyone had high hopes for after the Yemen government restructured is that they would do away with the corrupt governors, the Islamists in Shabwa and all these other places. They would get kicked out, they would get replaced by competent people, and all the billions that were stolen from everybody over the decades, you can replace those, but at the very least they would now focus on rebuilding the institutions, paying the civil servants, bringing back electricity and so forth. That did not happen. Why did this plan not succeed? What happened? Where are we now?
The people who are in charge are, as I said, half-hearted. They don't want it, and you need a real help and a real intervention from the Europeans and the Americans and the British, because they are the people who are knowledgeable in how to help to rebuild a failed state. We've got to acknowledge that there is a failed state, though it is now internationally recognized, but it has got embassies. The embassies are so weak, they're not doing their work. Have you seen our ambassadors anywhere in interviews? Whereas the Houthis have got 10 or 15 5 ladies and 10 other people, and they're working more efficiently than all this Ministry of External Affairs, of Foreign Affairs. Where is it? So the government, we have got sort of a ghost government, which is not actually active. The only part of your strength is you're internationally recognized. But where are you? We don't see you. Have we seen they're speaking about that there is a Yemeni parliament, which is now with the government. Have we seen the parliamentarians, the Yemeni parliamentarians at the capital or here in Westminster?
I've never seen a single person. I don't even know who they are.
They're being paid and so on. It's the mistake from the beginning, because Ali Abdullah Saleh had been told to build a real, sort of parliament. He got these sheikhs and so on who are weak and who are inefficient and who are not knowledgeable and so on. So they're sitting there like useless.
The main question is, let's suppose, for instance, that the US will wake up and instead of trying to persuade Houthis to follow the Saudi peace plan, which is never going to happen, and wasting time traveling back and forth, between Riyadh, Aden, and Abu Dhabi. Let's say they decide to get serious, start working with all involved to replace all these failed institutions. Is there anyone to replace them with? Where do you find the competent people who can run these, who can be appointed or elected or brought in to actually do things the right way?
There are a lot of people on the ground, but I think a lot of these people they are trying to shy away because they know that there is no such a prospect which is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
We've got, our people everywhere. We've seen here new faces and all these people who joined in this conference. Most of them are efficient, but they feel that they are not wanted. They feel that they have been sidelined. They feel that the West is not interested in actually getting back Yemen and building peace. They feel that perhaps this situation of no peace, nobody is actually solving the problem. Perhaps the regional powers and the international powers want the situation to continue like that. But that is very dangerous. Now we have seen that the Iranians are having the upper hand, and they could easily have more power in the area, which is quite a strategic and important area. The Iranians are now more feeling of confident to even send their ships towards Bab al-Mandeb. But again, so the question of building the state, building the economy, getting people to feel more hopeful that there is something going to come and that there is light at the end of the tunnel is a big question which can be held. As they have built, at one time the Europeans and the Americans helped us in what we call the outcomes of the National Dialogue Conference. Mm-hmm. Those outcomes were agreed by everybody. Where are those people who agreed on this? They were not. Those young people, the women, the youth, and the different, at least half of those people who were in the people who were in the conference and who were aiming for democratization, building a modern, state, and getting civil rule and so on, are sidelined. They're not in the government. They're not anywhere. They're still there, and they know them. The ambassadors, the 10, the 13 ambassadors who were helping the dialogue conference, know them. I couldn't get in touch with them.
We don't hear, by the way, their voices in the West either. We hear from al-Islah activists a lot, yes, too much.
Because they are sidelined. They're there. Mm-hmm. Nobody is helping them. Nobody is getting them to speak. How could they get outside? They are inside there, suffering with all this situation. Then people now have got more, worries about their, people not receiving their salaries. The economy mm-hmm. is in complete melt. So they have got other worries, and sure, people have not got in touch with them, and they have lost even some of them hope that there is any way in which we could get over this tragic situation, in all aspects of life in Yemen.
So let's suppose finally everyone realizes that those voices are out there, that a model is out there, that we had this conference, that a constitution can be written. The next step, though, is bringing everyone together, creating structure, creating these institutions, rebuilding trust. Now, the US has been, let's put it this way, lost a lot of credibility supporting the Arab Spring around the world with absolutely disastrous results. What kind of a state can be built? US doesn't like monarchies, but it also doesn't like dictatorships, and it likes democracies, but only the ones that what that happen to be aligned with whatever political party is in power, but not the other way around. So what credibility can US, Europe, United Kingdom have with trying to create working, functional, law and order dedicated institutions when our own experiences with foreign democratic processes have been so poor?
I think, getting a proper leadership, if you can get a proper leadership who are, who can understand what is the actual faults now in the whole situation, and starting to work from there, and having the Europeans, the Americans, and the British actually leading, not on the back seat, They're in the back seat, not. We wish they were backseat drivers. No, they have left the driving for somebody else who's taken the wrong route and taken the whole situation.
And is driving into a lake. But that brings us from the general to more concrete, which is the Southern Civil Democratic Rally, your own activities and the conference about Aden that we are seeing today. What is your role in the current processes? What are you hoping to achieve given these realities?
Okay. The Southern Democratic Rally was established on the basis how to bring Southerners together, how to build a sort of a coalition, that how could you make the Southerners agree to help each other?
Sure.
See, the question in the South, since the British left, is the Southerners were fragmented, especially Adenis are on the sideline left, the others are fighting between themselves and so on. How could you build a sort of, not a consensus, how could you bring all these groupings together on a very broad, agenda, so as to rebuild the South? That's our goal. And we are trying on those bases, trying to convince the other groupings that we have got to have some sort of a platform where we accept each other, not on the basis of demonizing one or demonizing the other, or how to build this the culture of dialogue, the culture of accepting the other side, and so on. This is what we're trying to build. And we have got our own agenda, which was written like 10, 15 years ago now, but still we feel that it can play a role towards that. We have, we have relations with all these groupings in the South, all the groupings, whether they're now, the Southern Transitional Council, or the other groupings who don't agree with the Southern Transitional Council, unfortunately. So we're trying to play the role of a broker between them, on the basis of all of us have got to accept each other and to agree how to rebuild the institutions in the South, how to regain stability in the South. And that cannot be done, because if you go now in the South and say there's no security in Aden, this problem has nothing to do with the North. It's a problem between the Southerners themselves, the forces who are ruling now in Aden, unfortunately, and who have managed to grab power in each area. It just reminds me of perhaps what the mafia in Chicago in 1937 during the Prohibition.
Sure.
You've got each one of them holding a certain district or part of a district and milking it with money, and they don't want to come into agreement so that to build a real state. So we're facing that thing, and we think that our Arab neighbors could help in that. But the help much more could come from the British. The British tried to help the Southerners. We were involved in 2012 during the Arab Spring. They brought, the British had an experiment here, not actually, that time in 1964, 65, they're trying to bring the Southerners together, all of them, the different nationalist groupings, the different parties, the sultans and so on, but they never agreed. They were here in in one of the famous palaces. I'm trying to remember during 19 after once at the beginning of the Labour government in 1964, and they failed. They brought us again in Cairo, all these different groupings, the different, and we did not agree on each other. We failed. Now we're trying to continue. We were the one who helped to bring this grouping together with the help of the British and the Americans at that time in 2012, and it faltered because, again, as you can see now in Hadramaut, we have got fighting between the groupings. One is with the side, the other was, and they can't agree on a certain, platform. I think the platform is how to rebuild the country, how to rebuild it, and to establish a democracy which they agree to come to rule through the ballot box at the end. But for the 5 years first, you've got to establish building the country, rebuilding the state and its institutions.
They seem to be, both the factions themselves and the powers behind them seem to be putting the carriage before the horse. They're focusing on whether to secede or to unify instead of focusing on having basic things. Because whether you secede or whether you unify, you still need an economy, you need healthcare, you need education, you need to have basic security.
I agree.
You cannot be a successful state if you're already failing from the beginning.
Well, that's what we are preaching.
But apparently these voices are not.
No, we've got to help. There, the West could help us. How to preach such, those tasks as to be. How to put, again, as you have said, the horses before the carriage.
This is something that I hope we will see a lot more of in the future. I think a lot more different voices need to be heard. We've been hearing the same talking points that have stopped making sense a long time ago, and now from at least focusing on some common threads, now everybody is just going at each other. But
let's keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully that our friends in the West and in the States especially, and in UK could help us, because their experience in rebuilding a failed state that's why we all the time here try to put some blame on our friends, the British. But I haven't been in the States for a long time now to try and drive that kind of message. But hopefully through your program we could send that message and send it loud to them so they could hear it.
I hope so. I think everything is falling apart everywhere. I think, ironically, the US in particular, but also Europe, also the United Kingdom, have always been afraid of chaotic, unpredictable developments. They've always been afraid of siding with particular factions, so they've always looking for one faction to side to create. They've always been looking for political stability.
Why don't they go on building consensus? As the British have said, they tried in 1964, they failed.
And ironically, this fear of chaos has brought this chaos right to the door, and it's spreading, and it's endangering international institutions. It's driving refugees, some of them radical ones, all over the world, and it's creating a destabilization in the region. From Yemen, it's not far to go to other places, and especially since those other places are also, Lebanon and so forth, being destabilized at the same time. So if we can have a successful model of something from falling apart, from entropy, kind of returning back to some segments of stability, maybe that will bring the West back into action and kind of bring them into believing that it is doable, that rebuilding is possible. Failed experiments in Iraq, in Afghanistan with state building, unfortunately, for the same reasons.
They use the wrong people.
Backing corrupt people and then claiming that it's completely impossible, or not understanding who you're talking to and what you're doing. That should, instead of bringing despair, that should have taught us lessons about how to do it better. Instead, we're seeing this fear of getting involved at all. But I don't think it's true. I think it's possible to learn practical lessons and step by step to create a better reality. And I hope people like you can kind of explain how to do that and lead by example.
Thank you very much for this chance to be with you, and hopefully the message we are sending is going to be heard by a lot of people and continue on the same trajectory.
Thank you so much for everyone watching us. This was the Washington Outside the Report on the Coalition Radio. We'll be back again next week, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And thank you, Dr. Qubaty, for being with us today, right after the conference on Aden, and for discussing these important matters, for clarifying and demystifying a lot of things that are very poorly understood, even in the region, much less in the West, and hopefully help us to problem solve and not just